Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. What is sensorality? What is a sensor? What is sensation? What does sensorality stabilize? Ultimately, looking to show the direct iteration of that syllability, that association to sound, to letters that are on your screen, in a unique, meaningful way to produce a definition. Energy is movement potential. Power is energy velocity, directly producing a physical definition by our analysis of language. And so, before we get into the derivation steps, kind of just renormalizing, restating our empirical evidence, because we were at the point where, language, the base of language is sound. Regardless of what language you speak, sounds are produced because of movement. Vibration is the limit of rhythm. From rhythm to algorithm, this predominant physical principle that is clearly real and has not been integrated into physical ontology at all. But regardless, ultimately looking to establish this working definition, what is sensorality, but we have, like last time we discussed the alphabet, and so the English alphabet specifically, but sound is the base of any language. And so we have this irreducibility of letters, of shapes to those sounds. Those sounds have meanings. We already have differentiated sound into consonants and resonance. The only sounds you can hear me make right now are resonants, also known as vowels, and then we modify those vowels with consonants. When you represent that linguistically, meaning with letters, we have some unit because our objects are discrete. Our letters are also discrete. They have some sort of spacing that produces symmetry. You can see that on your screen with the letters as well. And so, just ultimately progressing our analysis, our derivation, to get to definitive conclusions. But we have this sound E. It's ever prevalent. Our big empirical evidence, a bunch of people play the guitar. We have the same anatomy, and we have this bass E. But in musical ontology, we call them keys. And when you say a bass, the logical equivalent of a bass in music for a key is a root, right? You call the E tone the root of the key of E. And so that gets us another well-defined verbiage, rooting, which we've used naturally throughout this derivation, but it's a well-defined process in musical ontology, right? If you want to return to a key, you have to come back to a given tone, your bass tone, your root tone. And so a bunch of people come around together, the guitar exists, and why is the guitar tuned to E? Again, it's some sort of consolidation. It's the most versatile, you can play the most amount of range, the most amount of songs. Poignant piece of empirical evidence, and then the most relevant poignant piece of empirical evidence is the base of the natural logarithm is E. So we have this fundamental relationship of the sound E, right? Irreducibility, E is E. Now we have this whole logical framework, which we all work in and exist in. It is what it is. Physics is linguistics, directly, literally. It's an iteration of it is what it is. And so we're describing the world around us with this irreducible structure that we were all born into, and we just started learning associations of sounds to things, to experiences, to processes. And we're exploring this, okay, we have this alphabet, we have some sort of structure, some sort of differentiation. How are we going to represent our sounds? And as we went through explicitly last time, the tone E is the most prevalent. And then mathematically, we're kind of, again, that's the base E. The base of the natural log is E. We look at the alphabet. What do you really say when you say these different letters, right? What is a letter? This association of structure, of shape to sound. And so we went through, you can go watch that, the keyboard episode, literally the one right before this, but you say the tone E 9 out of 26 times. And so we can kind of generalize that. We had this result. You're only saying when you say the alphabet, the English alphabet, you only have 7 tones. And it's all some sort of vibration, and then consonants to modify that vibration to give you your individual letters, right? Letters have spellings, which is still an interesting thing that most people don't point out explicitly. But now back to music, right? How many keys are there? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 7 tones uniquely presented by the English alphabet, 7 keys presented by music, independent of one language. So this natural iteration limit of 7 units is present. And so we have the letter Y, right? When you say the letter Y, it's not a vowel. It's not a unique sound. You're literally saying I. So A-E-I-O-U, sometimes Y, never Y. Y is not a vowel being a unique articulation of resonance. And so then we have this overall functionality of these different sounds, right? E is E. The base of the natural log is E. The sound E we say for all of these different letters. But then, right, sensorality. We have this function, a good base pair that elicits this well is you have fun, and then you have funny, right? Most people wouldn't have associated the word funny is the same way you say that's salty, he's embarrassed. You're associating the thing salt with the sound E. It's like salt, it's embarrassing, just an association people have made. Funny is fun with the sound E. Funny is like fun. We have this association, the likeness bias is what I introduced it as, but we have this association of the sound E to like. And then you can see that consistency independent of one language, right? Like, cuck, como. Just for the Cyrillic, different Cyrillic languages in Spanish specifically, the ones that come to mind, but the sound k. And then we have this iteration of C and K, sometimes sounding like an S for the letter C, and then sometimes sounding like the letter K for the letter C. We have this overall iteration of sound. And so we have the sound E at the end of the words to represent likeness. Linguistically, we can replace that sensorality with a Y and then put in the letter E, because the letter E is E, right? It is what it is. And so we did that for our linguistics, and that proves sensorality real. It's directly, literally what sensorality is. We might get interrupted by the barking. Let's see. Come on. Yeah, I'm going to pause and we'll pick back up here in a second. So we're back. Hopefully, again, trying to do this all in one go, but again, it doesn't matter. Again, all of the logic is contained within the letters, just recapping our empirical evidence. So we're on the functionality of the independent sounds, right? What does, like in Spanish, right? The sound E for and, the sound, I'm pretty sure in Cyrillic, right? E to E-li, this and in or. And so we have this very clear functionality of the sound E represented by the letter Y as and, as a conjunction. And so Y is not a vowel. We have this Y representing E at the end of words. We have, then you go over into French, right? Just to use another sound, right? We have this geometric relationship between the letter E and the letter A. Historically, it's the inversion ash, right? That's like the infinity sign, but E and A are inverses. And so, but like if you go over to French and you say something like I have, j'ai, right? You're still saying that A sound. If you say and in French, you say A, like represented by ET. If you conjugate être and you say je suis, right? Or tu es, vous êtes, right? You're using the sound A represented EST. Again, just pointing out the functionality of independent sounds throughout these different languages. Right, you learn the Roman alphabet for the English language, right? You still have LMNOP. You go look at the Cyrillic alphabet, you still have LMNOP. And so you still have these sequences in the same way there's 7 tones, 7 keys of music, 7 unique tones of the English language. We have a finite amount of unique sounds you can make. That's the overall important part, again, of this independence of one language. And then you have this association of sound to meaning, where whenever you articulate something most poignantly, most specifically, most clearly, that verbiage sticks around from another language. That's why you have a ton of loan words in every language. And so just progressing on with any of our empirical evidence. And so that we'll get back to some of those concepts, again, going off the top of my head with a little bit of barking break, just to recap our empirical evidence. Continuing on. Obscenitality is derogatory. Sensorality is derogatory. Denigration is derogatory. A mode is a chronology. So back to that music, when you have a mode, you have a sequence of tones, you have a set amount of tones, the way you progress through them produces a key. You have our fundamental dichotomy, major and minor keys, but it's the same set, just literally the sequencing, but there's only two, right? You have a major and a minor, you don't have a tri, right? Thrice is not a word. This fundamental stability in two in music is our major and minor keys and their dichotomies. It's the same bass. And then a mode, whatever tone you start on in that progression gives you the different modes. What are modes to setting, right? Gus mode, that's bark. Gus mode is when Gus the dog starts barking, but just a mode is a setting. Sensorality is modality. Sensorality is a module. Sensorality is molecular. Molecular, circular. Emphasizing, again, the circularity is the base of a lot of things, because as we point out last time, if you have a rhythm in so-called translational motion or in a straight line, because of the geometry and the topology of the things you are interacting with, you yourself are a physical thing. If you walked in a quote-unquote straight line, you're still forming effectively an orbit, right? You're still going to have your two, you're going to have eccentricity, your major and minor axes, major and minor again, music, astrophysics, Kepler's laws, musical keys, words have meaning, it's consistent in all contexts. A section is a set. Set tests. Testing probes. Probe mode. Far is the opposite of near. Far, for. What is proximity to dexterity? Sensorality is ambidexterity. Ambidextrous, ambidexterity. What is dexterity to perplexity? Again, any of the questions, I don't expand any, it's just relating the syllability, the sound and the structure of the word. The closer they are, again, where language differentiates. We're showing this fundamental rooting, logically, of this fundamental stability. Sensorality, we have to find its other dichotomistic pair, and it will show this fundamental inversion, stabilization, iteration, thing we've been building up to for a while, the whole series. But what is dexterity to perplexity? Convolution perplexes. Consolation, consolidation. Sensorality consolidates. What is integration to consolidation? Right, we're reducing all of this logic. Sensorality needs to be a direct working definition. You don't need to learn everything that came in history to have a productive life. Moving along. What is a function to a junction? Right, the function of the sound E, this likeness, fun, E, or and in a lot of languages. What is the function of a conjunction? Right, you have two sets, you put a U and you said it's union. Where at the center of mass we have communion. At the center of mass we have community. Right, and people, individuals are massive. Just connecting a lot of the different ideas. But the function of a junction is joining, is togetherness, combining. We're all in this together. Censorship is the function of sensorality. Sensorality is surreality, right? Surreal. So now again, remember, we had this sensorality is surreal way back when, and you're kind of like, how does this syllability connect? Well, now you can directly see it, right? Reality is reality. Sensorality spelled with this analysis that we've properly motivated. You just have, sensorality is surreality. Denomination, denominator. Sensorality is denominatorality. Orality nominates. Sensorality dominates. Sensorality is dominationality. Sensorality is nationality. Spelling orders syllability. Spelling stabilizes syllability. Stabilizing sets. So again, now we've kind of introduced correctly and properly that all spelling is a geometric consequence, which is massive and huge and profound. And you would say, wow, Brad, if you could actually do that, that would be huge. We already have. Speciality, special with an ITY, again, is this entire analytical process done. But we continue on. Sensorality sets in stone. Right? A phrasing connecting cliches. Sensorality is the why. So now back to, again, these sounds are sounds, Y is Y. And we've had this, the functionality of the letter Y, but the sound Y is I, right? Sensorality is the Y, right? You ask a question, why? What did you just say? You said I with W in front of it, right? And so what is Y to I? Right? You're relating it back to yourself, right? General relativity is we're all individuals. We're all talking about the same things, but it's all articulated. I've always been me, you've always been you. Whoever the I that is articulating that symbol saying me, je, ya, I, whatever. It's all generally relative, but it's all not unique. Realization is not independent. Hunger is hunger, sleepiness is sleepiness, so on and so forth. But to our analysis, analytical processy tools, and so again, it's worth pointing out explicitly that, again, Terence Tao doesn't say, hey, I'm going to prove to you addition is consistent. We're doing that. We are demonstrating the consistent progression of all operation of every bit of logical structure that is present in what you call analysis or mathematics or anything of STEM, science, all of it in once. And so the question word WH letter Y is just the sound I with W in front of it, which is worth pointing out again that H, TH from math, for our ordinality, the TH, it's the same theme, the, Y, but and I just have the natural definition, Y the word is Y the letter, and that is a natural definition because Y is Y. Again, this irreducibility of sound is now what we're functioning on empirically. We've introduced our empirical evidence, we have our analytical tools, and we are working up to a specific solution, resolution, what is sensorality? And so why is it conjunction? But this is, again, we just to the overall question words, right? What is a question? What is the functionality of questioning, right? It's to fill in incompleteness, to demonstrate congruence, consistency, completeness. But we have where, what, when, why, and how. So now we can even differentiate these, okay, because we have sounds, we have different letters, we have different vowels in certain words, right? E is the base of where and when, A is the base of what, Y is why, and it's not a vowel. We just proved that the letter, but Y, the word, is still the sound Y. How is, again, clearly different because it starts with an H. All of the other ones start with a W. Not just a W, but a WH. So now we've just, again, chopped off the W, but like they all have WH in them. So the biggest difference from how is the O, not even the H, because they all of them have H too. But I'm sure you've probably thought about throughout history is like, or you personally, the word how is like way different. It's literally who. Again, just pointing out the literalness, because that's where we're at, is all the low-hanging fruit in linguistics, because nobody's ever done any of this stuff before. But back to, again, these results independent of language, right? You don't have a Y like in Spanish. Por qué, porque. By what, by that. Another Spanish phrasing that logic always pops up, again, que tal, what such, tal que, such that. And it's a very natural mathematical, such that, let this be this, such that. Right? All of your language is mathematical. Right? All language is themed. And then functionally, again, we have this letter Y representing the sound E, but then you go over into Spanish or in a bunch of other languages, specifically Spanish, right? The letter I is the sound E. And so, right, again, all of this is some sort of differentiation from sound, right? Languages are not unique. Languages are not distinct. I might say they're distinct, but they're not unique. They're certainly not fundamental. They're not the basis. They're not the base. Still conceptually basic, basis, bases is still like, what the fuck? But it all resolves. Again, we've already resolved this stuff. But are diphthongs dichotomistic? So again, I wanted to emphasize, I keep saying dichotomistic, which means two things to one thing. You have two charge, positive, negative. They have one orbit. They have one spin. So that's the fundamental physical two things coming together to make one. It's not your parents making a baby. It's the fundamentality of charge in orbit. You have one periodicity for two things orbiting. But I say for dichotomy, everyone uses that word. We've explicitly discussed cotomality is charge. But the congruence, the mapping, how do we go from cotomy to charge is not apparent. But why do we expand to dichotomy to dichotomonistic, which you do? And I've done that extremely naturally my whole life, and that's not even like a mathematical framework anybody's acknowledged anywhere, ever. But why dichotomy to dichotomonistic, right? Because again, this two thing goes to one thing, but why not just dichotomality? Well, sensorality is dichotomality. But conceptually, that's linguistically closing that up. Conceptually, cotomality to charge. Again, just working through the definitions. Because again, it's worth pointing out, I present this, we are like I don't know the answer to sensorality. Like we're working up, it's at this point, see this is a point where science team having the word form, it's not some secret logical thing, but I'm just doing it again through all of the steps that you've never seen before for the structure of language. But the end of like the conceptual, what is sensorality, it's got to be like smack you in the face, right? The motivation, my microwave does not have senses with an S, is very apparent, but it says it's a sensor. We've gone through that a bunch. Again, really focusing today on the empirical evidence, what it all means together, and then pointing out more functionality of this irreducibility of sound. We use these independent sounds, which are vowels, for discrete functions. And, conjunction, E. We just went through them all, or the ones that came to mind. So that is what I have for right now. My rights continue to be violated. I continue to beg for a little bit of money. I've been seeking asylum outside of the United States legitimately for a long time now. It is the weirdest thing in the world to be a zoo animal for the species where you're literally like, hey, here's my rights, here's my property, my entire health is destroyed. Please let me live some quality of something. And people are just like, we'll call him smart when he's dead, so we'll just torture him his whole entire existence. But that is the reality of what it is, right? It is what it is. So my rights continue to be violated. Thank you for watching. I beg for a little bit of money and some mercy. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.